My name is Jerm. This is Germ Warfare, the battle of ideas.
Jim Lee, thank you for joining me in the trenches again.
It's good to be back.
Well, we have, or you have, unleashed the Kraken. I'm not quite sure how to respond, but one thing I will tell you, Jim, is that I am apparently a grifter. I'm a sellout. I'm a government agent. I'm control opposition. I'm a loser, baby.
So why don't you kill me?
I mean,
well,
what-
you did. I'm just clarification for everybody at home. I did see him at the secret ritual that we had last Saturday night. And in our underground lair, the Illuminati said that they're going to buy him a double wide, just like me. So he's going to have an Illuminati funded double wide, just like me. So it's all true. It's all true. We're both, we work for the shadow government. And I don't know what else to say about that. You're going to believe what you want to believe, but these are working hands, okay? Like if I was pushing papers and I was a millionaire, I certainly wouldn't be on here talking about freaking chemtrails and geoengineering. I just would be on a beach in Hawaii playing Ziggy Marley.
But here's the thing. It's a very attractive argument. You have to realize that the world is a big place and it's nuanced. And there is a lot of complexity. And if it's true that I'm not being sprayed from above, then that's a good thing.
It is. And at the same time, you are being sprayed from above. It's just not the way you're, that it's popular to say. People, they really, they once you believe a narrative long enough, it's hard to not believe it. But documented cases like the U.S. Air Force spraying adulticide chemicals. I was on Del Bigtree's The High Wire. I did an episode with him, and I brought this up kind of as a throwaway line, just to kind of show people an example. And then to prove my point, I made this, this very clickbait title, U.S. Air Force admits chemtrails, adulticide. And side means to kill, adult. They're like, oh, well, that must mean they're killing people and the Air Force is doing it. This easily became the #1 article on my Substack, climateviewer.news, instantaneously. And the sad part is I don't believe that very many people actually read it, because the whole point was when I was on Del Bigtree's High Wire, I was talking about Youngstown Air Reserve Base Station, their aerial spray squadron, which sprays for mosquitoes. ICANN went on to do FOIAs, bringing back just absolutely ridiculous amounts of information on these programs. And I did this to talk about this, the pictures that people constantly share. And I'm like, no, that's not the chemtrail planes. That is a C-130 from Youngstown Air Reserve Station from their aerial spraying unit. And this is herbicides. This is like Agent Orange. We'll call this one Agent Green. And it's, clearly spraying. There's the spray nozzle. You can see it right there on the corner. So this is called the modular aerial spray system in the back of a C-130. And they are spraying chemicals that are toxic to humans, to bees, to just about everything. Apparently in the FOIAs, it said, well, we're going to avoid, bald eagle nests, but we're going to go right over residential neighborhoods. During Katrina, they were running these planes all day and all night because you have so much standing water. So they're spraying for mosquitoes to kill them. Now, okay, they call that disease vector control, but is that not chemtrails? I mean, that is a pump, a pipe, and chemicals being sprayed.
It's technically a chemtrail, yes.
Right. So what we really have to get to, what is a chemtrail? And the sad part is that people don't want to find nuance in semantics and ontology, like the meaning of words and how we relate them to the world around us. So for me, chemtrail, chemical trail, contrail, condensation trail, well, then it's a contrail and a chemtrail, because it's a trail of chemicals coming from the jet exhaust, which condensation sticks to, which turns into a cloud. And once it turns into a cloud, it's neither a chemtrail or a contrail anymore. It's a cirrus cloud. That kind of, conversation can't be had because people are so on the surface with this that they want to just go, well, I see it with my eyes, therefore I know it's true. You're saying that this doesn't even exist. No, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying it's a problem. I've been saying it's a problem for 15 years. I testified 11 years ago at the United States Environmental Protection Agency's hearing on aviation pollution. You didn't do that. No other chemtrail person did that. I brought 3 of my friends with me, Max Bliss, Patrick Roddy from Stop Spraying Us, San Francisco, Amanda Bays, Madison Star Moon is her nickname, and Michael Saraceno, a guy I met on Twitter at the time, who talked about the effects of nanoparticles around airports causing autism and neurological problems. The thing is, people want to complain about the thing, but I would ask you this. If you're watching somebody who's scaring the hell out of you on a daily basis and they're not offering a solution, then they are not an activist, they're an infotainer. And there is a distinct difference between an activist and an infotainer. Infotainers are great for, feeding your addiction to fear. Now, a lot of you will go, I'm not addicted to fear. Well, that's the first step in the 12 steps. Is you got to admit you have a problem. And if you're fine, hey, do you, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but if you walk outside and you're constantly going, man, they're trying to kill us, and somehow that causes you stress, then you need to deal with that in some way, because I'll tell you what, stress is going to kill you long before the chemtrails ever will. So for me, that was the root of me coming out of my chemtrail beliefs early on. Was I wanted to prove that, I was right. And in trying to prove that I was right, instead of, just pointing the finger and saying, this person's a shill, that person's an agent, I engaged in them with vigorous debate. Because if you really want to learn anything, forget learning anything. If you want to know you're right, it's one thing to think you're right. It's another to confirm that you're right, not through confirmation bias, but through vigorous debate with people you disagree with. So in confronting people that I vigorously disagreed with, time after time after time, I started to see holes in my own arguments. That's called metacognition. That goes all the way back to Aristotle and Socrates. How do you know anything? And the wise man would say, I know that I know nothing. So in that sphere, I'm constantly open to the possibility that I'm wrong, and I'm constantly confronting people that disagree with me to go, well, show me where I'm wrong. In fact, I've literally said, at Climate Viewer on YouTube, Rumble, X, wherever, I will debate anyone, anytime, under any condition on these subjects, because guess what? Even if I lose the debate, I win at the end of the day, because now I'm growing again. I'm learning something new. My viewpoints have changed. It's piqued my curiosity, and I'm going to grow from that. Too many people have very crystalline viewpoints, and I want to be like water. I want to constantly go, am I right? Am I being honest to myself? And then my duty as an activist who's trying to educate others is to make sure that I'm telling them the truth, not just my truth, because that subjective truth shit is not real. I want to know that I'm telling the truth. And especially when I'm petitioning the government to make a change about the skies and clear the air, so to speak, I want to make sure that I don't look like a fool when I'm making these claims. So I'm not making claims based on my speculation, my biases. I'm making them based on the totality of evidence that I'm able to collect myself, that I can verify independent of journals and science and universities and governments, and then comparing and contrasting that with what does the totality of information plus propaganda tell me. That's how you get to, logical truth. This is the infallible only answer that I have left. Does that make sense? Am I overcomplicating that?
No, it makes sense. But the question then that will come up, Jim, is why the focus on the motivation behind chemtrails? Does it really matter ultimately? It's still toxins in the air.
It matters because there are too many people who are singularly focused on the fact that every plane is part of a secret agenda. And once you go down that rabbit hole, and that's where you get stuck, then you can't really focus on things like, well, if I don't like weather modification, then I don't like people who are doing cloud seeding. If I don't like cloud seeding, then I got to recognize the fact that cloud seeding is invisible. So every single cloud seeding project that has occurred since the 1940s is completely invisible. You cannot see somebody burning silver iodide flares. Either those are calcium chloride. These flares, which contain a lot of aluminum in them, but, I'm not going to focus on that. My point is, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and bring my first graphic up to kind of just explain where we are in the world when we're talking about this, if you don't mind. So when we're looking at the sky and we're looking at the troposphere typically, and this is going to range depending on where you are in the world. So if you're at the equator, obviously the number is going to be higher. The closer you get to the North or South Pole, the lower the division between the troposphere and the stratosphere is. But typically, we're talking about around 39,000, 40,000 feet. That 12 kilometers, that is the division between the troposphere and the stratosphere. All weather modification occurs in the troposphere. So we're talking about from 1 foot off the ground all the way up to about 40,000 feet, 12 kilometers. Weather modification using cloud seeding generators, cloud ionizers, lasers, even marine cloud brightening, which is a form of geoengineering off of boats. All of that occurs on the ground. And the planes that are flying burning flares, anywhere from 1,000 feet to about 20,000 feet. Going any higher than that really doesn't make any sense if you're just trying to make it rain. Then the geoengineers like David Keith, we'll pop their faces up here for a second. David Keith, Ken Caldera, all of these, wonderful people that everybody constantly talks about, but really they don't know the faces. These gentlemen right here, David Keith, Ken Caldera, probably the two most famous geoengineers on the planet, most hated. When they're talking about doing solar radiation management, SRM, they're talking about 60 to 90,000 feet. So we're talking 18 to 27 kilometers. So there's this disconnect between geoengineering stratospheric aerosol injection, the intentional release of chemicals to abate global warming, and all of the planes we see flying, which are flying between 30,000 to 40,000 feet, 45,000 feet if you're talking about private jets. So that's about the limit. And we know this because you can go to adsbexchange.com any day and just zoom in, click on a private jet, and it'll show you that this private jet is currently at 43,000 feet. So that plane is currently in the stratosphere, and we can see that. And we can see that, right now I have ADSB Exchange up, and you can see that every square inch of the map is covered in planes. It is absolutely insane when you see the size and scope of how many planes are in the air at any given time. And we're talking about attuned to, 100 to 150,000 flights per day. That doesn't jive with the geoengineering plan. but it is geoengineering. So this is where the disconnect really happens, is that people, they see a thing and they assume that it's the thing that David Keith and Ken Caldera and Bill Gates have been talking about all along. When in fact, every geoengineering project that has occurred to date, especially stratospheric aerosol injection, those tests, they were all done with balloons. So make it make sense. Why are they launching balloons to test geoengineering? But every single plane is part of Bill Gates' secret program to geoengineer the planet.
You and I are misrepresenting their position. They're not saying it's every plane. They're saying that it's some planes.
And this is what I will challenge, because and just so you know, everybody on the last comment, the last video, I read all your comments. I had to withhold. I said, you know what? I could go in there and literally destroy every one of the comments, because I'm that guy. I like fighting. I love fighting. I would debate you, but the reality of the situation is that half of the comments are made by astroturfers. They're not even real people. The other ones are very biased in their belief system. And honestly, even when other real people, because I know who the people were that were commenting and responding, they're all members of my Telegram chat. They're in there trying to talk sense into these people. Meanwhile, they have no response for, the answers they're given. Wow, just had a brain fart. Where were we?
Well, I was just saying that we apparently
we're
misrepresent. We're misrepresenting. It's not every plane. It's some planes.
It's very simple. You go and look at the radiosonde data. And this is very easy to do. You can go to windy.com. You can go to any place that has a radiosonde. Look at what the atmospheric conditions are in your area at the time you take this video. And all you have to do is two things. Have a video camera. Have your cell phone in your hand. Have ADS-B exchange or flight radar. In fact, show both. Take a video of the plane that you're claiming is chemtrailing. Go to your flight tracker, show me the flight, and then show the atmospheric conditions.
I've asked that exact same question multiple times, and then they also say, yeah, but some of these planes are not on flight radar.
But they don't show up on flight radar. That's what they always say. And I say, bullshit. I have been doing this for 15 years. Out of 15 years, for the first 7 years, I did almost every single plane that I saw in the sky. And out of that entire time, maybe 5 planes didn't show up on the flight radar, on any one of the flight radars. So that is a possibility. It's extremely rare that you're going to see a plane that does not show up on any flight tracker, especially ADS-B exchange, because ADS-B exchange is unique in that it is a citizen-powered network of people who paid money out of their pocket to put a listening device in their backyard that is not run by the government. In fact, it shows military flights that do not show up on any other flight tracker on the world. So, prove it.
Yeah, and the other one, the other comment is the zigzag. It's the crisscrossing.
Oh my gosh, let's just. All right, so let's look at the zigzags, because this is so easily, just ridiculously simple to prove. 30 years of airline travel. So many moons ago, these were all the flight tracks in the world in 1980, okay? 85, 90, 2000, 2004, 2008. Do we see a pattern here? This is caused by the exponential growth in flight. Better photo. I'm going to just skip past all. These are all the flight paths in America, just in the USA. You see how many tic-tac-toes there are of just planes flying past each other? Well, how about this? This is 1993. For comparison, this is 2004.
My goodness.
So I would say, without a doubt, that is a lot of tic-tac-toes in that area. Wouldn't you say that's a lot of tic-tac-toes?
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate. They'll say,
Please do.
this is a zoomed out view. We can't see that from our house. But what we can see is above the house and what's in
Yeah.
that.
So
and so we'll
what
see a
you would do
zigzag.
is you just simply just come in here to, like, say, Atlanta, and take a look at the directions of the flights. You can just start clicking on them, and there's that line. There's another one going that way. Which one's going? These are all flying up this way. So you can see they're all on a highway. You see that, right? You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flights all in a line. They're all flying in the exact same line. The reason why you get grids in the sky is because the air is flowing from west to east. So after the first plane flies by, that line then moves. The next flight comes by. Now you have another line. That line then moves. Then the next flight comes by, and then it moves. So it's not that they're flying and making the grids intentional. They're literally on highways in the sky, which run perpendicular to each other. So you're inevitably going to get grids. You're going to get X's. You're going to get these things because the sky is a river and these things are constantly moving. One of the biggest highway traffic jams in America happens right out over the Gulf. It goes straight from Miami all the way to Los Angeles, and you can follow it all the way across. And all of these planes, here's two that are literally crossing each other in opposite directions as we're speaking. They're on the same highway. Oh no, they're going to collide. No, they're going to fly. One's going to fly under the other, and they're going to leave lines that are going to, seem parallel, like they're flying side by side if they're leaving contrails at all. But that's my answer to that. It's very simple to look at that and go, okay, that's a thing.
But Jim, there are people who grew up in the 1960s and they don't remember the sun being as dim as what it is today.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's because if you look at the 1960s, there were barely any flights compared to today, for starters. The second answer is the engines were very different than the engines we have today. They had low bypass turbo jets, which produced large particles of black carbon. Back then, they had a thing called black belch. This was very evident at airports. If anybody watches a video of a B-52 bomber taking off, you'll see the plumes of black smoke coming out of the back of the engines. That is an old school low bypass turbojet, which all of the planes at the time had. In 1970, they invented the high bypass turbofan, and by 1990, 90% of all planes on the planet were flying with them. Now, these are distinctly different because they create nanoparticles. Way more nanoparticles, and they produce more particles at a colder temperature, which creates more contrails. So this is a visual comparison of the two. So before, you had large soot particles which made black dense smoke, which didn't make contrails that persisted as easily, whereas today you've got highly efficient engines that are roughly 3 to 10 times as large. I don't know if anybody's actually Googled this. Go look at a low bypass turbojet compared to a high bypass turbofan. You can literally see a pilot with his arm on the engine of an old jet back in the 1960s, and he's just leaning up against it. And then you go and look at, and I could bring a photo up right now, but we won't do the podcasters dirty like that. You do it yourself. High bypass turbofan, and then watch a man standing next to it. He's this big, and the engine is this big. So these are monstrously big engines. And of course, the next thing they would say is, well, that's because it's driven by a fan, and the fan doesn't even produce anything. But what they're wrong about is that the high bypass turbofan still has a jet engine. So the old engine would be just this main casing in the center. All they did was they added this huge cowl around it, put a big fan blade on the front of it. Now you still got the jet exhaust, but you also have this highly compressed, very cold air and a stream of cloud seeds coming out. These planes make more clouds. In fact, Here is a low bypass Boeing 707 right next to a high bypass Airbus A340, and it's making contrails. The old school plane is not. And this is because of the Schmidt-Appleman criterion. This is because of the way atmospheric physics happen. People don't want the nuance of that. They don't want to try to wrap their head around the science of that. I cannot convince you that this is true. You have to come to that on your own. And I'm not, so we're not going to do that. But what we can do is we can show you the tools. So you can go to windy.com and you can install the contrail finder. This will make it easy for you so that you don't actually have to click on a radiosonde plot and then understand how to read a skew T-plot, okay? I get that this is complicated for some people. Looks really complicated, There's numbers, there's a chart, there's all this stuff going on. Why would I want to look at that? That seems kind of tough, Jim. Why are you being a jerk about the science here? But the bottom line is, when you look at the Schmidt-Appleman criterion, you need two things. You need dew point depression, which is the difference between the temperature and the humidity. Temperature is the red line, humidity is the blue line. This is the dew point. So at about negative 60, at 60% humidity and negative 50 degrees Celsius, that's where you produce something called an ice supersaturated region. So if I go to the contrail finder and I just click randomly on the map, what you will see is long, possibly persistent contrails from 40,000 all the way down to 30,000 feet. 1,000 feet higher, long contrails possible. 42,000, 43,000 feet, short contrails possible. We said this in the last interview where I said literally you're going to see one plane leaving a chemtrail and 2,000 feet high above it is a plane that's not. And the reason why is because when you look at the numbers, I'm going to skip this is the Appleman chart over here. We'll just go to the one that's important. This is contrail persistence. Every one of these with a check mark, which is the 40,000 all the way to 30,000 feet, are in that range that I said. So right at about negative 50, they got right here is negative 48, negative 50, negative 52. Relative humidity and with respect to water, relative humidity with respect to ice, RHI. So at about 60%, that's all you need. These right here is 76% relative humidity, and then negative 50. All of these are what's called an ice supersaturated region. These are the chemtrails you're looking for. So I can tell you right now, anybody here, I don't even have to know before I click it. I can look at this and I can already tell you based on atmospheric pressure. And I'm looking at high clouds right now. So everything in white is high clouds. This is not going to be near as bad over here, probably down here. There's
UK.
None.
Let's go to the UK since this is for UK column.
Okay. So over here in the UK, right here, we have none. So look, no contrails predicted for this portion. Now, here are the high clouds. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click. Oh, what do I see? Longer contrails, longer possibly persistent at 23,000 to 22,000 feet. That is not even possible in America because it's too close to the ground. Again, we go back to where is the tropopause? How low is the stratosphere? So as you go further north towards the North Pole, the stratosphere gets lower to the ground. It condenses all of that cold because once you hit the stratosphere, it starts to warm up. Now you can see that also right here in the radiosonde data. So if I actually look at the radiosonde data, this is your persistent contrail formation region right here. See where it's way far apart and then it starts to come together. Right about here is your sweet spot. And then as I come up this column, up this UK column, once we hit right here, I can tell you right without a doubt that at 35,000 feet, this is where the stratosphere begins. The reason why I know that is because now the temperature and the dew point, they go in opposite directions. This is called an inversion. It actually gets colder as you go up. So negative 32, negative 45, negative 57, negative 58, then negative 59, Oh, wait, negative 58, negative 57, negative 50, all the way back to negative 54. It's actually getting warmer. So once you hit the stratosphere, this is what's called an inversion. This is what causes big cumulus clouds to seem to hit an invisible wall and then spread out. Clouds do not form in the stratosphere, which brings us to the real point of this whole, the science experiment that I'm showing you here. If what you're seeing is geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol injection, it will not make clouds. It cannot make clouds. It is physically impossible to make clouds in the stratosphere using stratospheric aerosol injection. It would be invisible by default. So whoever explained this to you did a poor job of explaining what SAI is. The purpose of SAI is to whiten the sky by increasing albedo. That does not create clouds. So the rub is people think that they're seeing geoengineering, but in fact, most forms of geoengineering you cannot see. Does that make sense?
It does. But now, what are you ultimately saying then?
I'm saying that aircraft, just commercial aircraft, when you're buying crap off of Amazon.com and it's being flown to your house, that plane, which is not part of some secret government agenda, is modifying the weather. It is geoengineering the sky. Why? Whenever its exhaust goes into the stratosphere, almost 1 billion pounds of sulfur ends up in the stratosphere from commercial aviation. What did David Keith and Ken Caldera and Bill Gates want to do? The number one chemical that they said they want to put into the stratosphere to cool the planet is sulfur. Ding, ding, ding. Read the freaking papers. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody else. Read the science, the things that they've been trying to get budgets for, the experiments that have been done. It always comes back to one of 5 chemicals. It's sulfur. Calcium is number 2 at this point. Most people don't even know that calcium is a metal, but calcium. Aluminum, titanium oxide, and diamond dust. So those are the 5 chemicals that have been most studied, most talked about for geoengineering stratospheric aerosol injection. Sulfur has always been the number 1 that they've talked about for a specific reason. And when David Keith says, I want to do geoengineering with sulfur, but it's going to kill people, suddenly that's just not sexy. I don't know why it's not. I don't understand why people don't want to wrap their head around this. I'm going to route this real quick, and I'm going to play you just a short clip so that I can really bring this home. Now, this is all available on weathermodificationhistory.com/geoengineering. Who's funding geoengineering research, governance, and deployment? These are the people actually paying for geoengineering. All of the corporations, universities that are involved in this, and so open philanthropy, Pfizer, which is Bill Gates through Gates Venture, funding marine cloud brightening, the Solar Radiation Management Governance Initiative, which is degrees.ngo. I've been tracking these for years for a reason. Now, I say SRM will kill people. Why do I say that? Because that's what David Key says. Let me know if you can hear this, because you should be able to.
This is a really important moral point. So if I made a decision, or if there was a collective decision to do a geoengineering program, and you put, say, the kind of program I think makes more sense to put about 1 million tons a year in, but let's say, you might end up killing many tens of thousands of people a year as a direct result of that decision. I think that has moral consequences. I don't sweep it under the rug. So this is a case where I take this much differently from Alan and think it's a much more serious issue. Now, it's true that as part of doing that, you would hope that the overall benefits of human mortality would be so that you would save many, many more people than that. But the fact that you would save more people than you killed doesn't mean there's no moral impact.
He laughs as he says it. Doesn't mean there's no... Now, he's talking specifically about putting a million tons a year of sulfur into the stratosphere. This is from the Geoengineering Debate, August 7th, 2013. And then he goes on to say that geoengineering is already occurring every day through commercial aviation because commercial jets are putting their sulfur into the stratosphere. So people don't want to talk about that, that issue alone, how it's actually working. 27 reasons why. This is stratosphere. This is Alan Robach, the guy that's sitting right next to him, right here. This dude, Alan Robach, wrote a paper which basically came up with 27 reasons why solar geoengineering is a bad idea. Stratospheric geoengineering. And only 6 which are good ideas, reasons why it should happen. What I'm saying in effect is that planes are doing this for sure. They're just not doing it through separate bottles, separate pumps, separate pipes. That's why nobody's ever found them. That's why you're ridiculed by scientists and politicians and lawmakers anytime you try to make this argument that all of this is somehow some secret program. This is why Representative Monty Fritz, who I've talked to multiple times on the phone in Tennessee, who was the first in the United States to ban geoengineering and weather modification, could not understand why people were threatening to kill the Tennessee Department of Environmental Protection. After the law was passed, people had a lot of hopium that the chemtrails would go away. Well, we banned weather modification and geoengineering. The trails did not go away. So then hopium turned into copium, and people started threatening to kill the government officials for not doing their job. Meanwhile, they don't understand that the states have no ability to regulate aircraft traffic, let alone aircraft emissions. That's in the purview of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. The same thing happened in Florida. Florida is the sunshine state in America. That's their slogan. They banned geoengineering and weather modification. I applaud that. I am anti-geoengineering. I'm anti-weather modification. I always have been, always will be. I think these people are dangerous. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Most of them are grifters and will never, not with all the AI, not with all the sensors that they want to put up. It will be decades before we could even try to exert some kind of control on the weather without there being deleterious effects. And I applaud their actions. Yes, ban geoengineering, ban weather modification in your state. That way nobody can cloud seed. Nobody's going to geoengineer from your state anyway. But even if you ban it, you're still not going to be able to do anything about it. But at least you're making your point known. We do not approve of this. Every state, every country should ban geoengineering. And then eventually maybe we could get to a point where it's illegal. This does not change the fact that your laws cannot change physics. In physics, the Schmidt-Appleman criterion has been understood since the World War II. It has only gotten worse since World War II. And for those who say, well, this has only happened recently, it's never happened before. I'll show you newspaper articles from 1958 in Palm Springs, California, where they were saying, look, our entire economy is based on tourism and the contrails are not going away. In fact, they're blocking out the sun. In 1958. So is it a problem? You damn right it's a problem. That I've literally devoted my life to ending geoengineering in all its forms, including aviation pollution, which turns into cirrus clouds, which block the sun, and loading of the stratosphere with black carbon, metals, and sulfur from aviation fuel emissions. But you need to know that that's what the hell's doing it in order to fight the thing. So my main point is this. I personally believe the chemtrail conspiracy is this: to keep you people so scared of a freaking straw man that you never actually fight the problem. You're going to be so busy looking for my secret pipes, my secret pumps, my global warming. Oh, wait, I'll bet that 99% of the people who believe in chemtrails don't believe global warming is real. But so you can see through all the propaganda on that, but you can't see through the propaganda related to chemtrails because it just sounds too good to be true.
But I was saying to you before we started recording that there is a strange psychology here. It's like a victimhood mentality. There is a group of people who want it to be true that the skies are being littered with aeroplanes that are spraying us because they want to make us chronically ill. That's the other one. Not to kill us, but just to make us ill.
You know, what's even worse about the truth, the actual truth is this. And this is so sad that people believe this, that if they don't see the lines, it's not a spray day. That's where you've got it so twisted up in your head that if I see the thing is dangerous. If I don't see the thing is not dangerous.
Like during COVID.
Yeah. So
because remember, but the argument during COVID was a lot of flights were
canceled.
Were canceled. So therefore the skies were blue again.
74% of the flights went away during COVID, resulting in greater than a 50% reduction in clouds produced by planes. Is that because they just couldn't afford to continue poisoning everybody? It doesn't even make sense. In fact, if you look at the history of biological warfare, every aerial spray program, back to the zinc cadmium sulfide sprayings, what's called the Manhattan-Rochester Coalition, Operation Sea Spray, go get your entire list of crazy shit the government did to spray us. Every single one of those happened at low altitude. It doesn't even make sense. If you're going to make a concentrated poison to slowly kill the population or do some nefarious crap, to do it at 40,000 feet, at 12 kilometers up. All of these programs, like the Operation Large Area Coverage with the C-119s, they were flying, maybe 5,000 feet. They were not flying at 40,000 feet. So, dilution is the solution for pollution. So if you're going to actually, put some kind of dangerous chemical, to poison people, you're going to do it at a low altitude. Doesn't make sense. But let's pretend that they've got some kind of special concoction that they're, okay, I can go with that. Riddle me this. If there are no white lines behind the planes, people who believe this will tell you it's a no spray day. They said during the government shutdown, well, they weren't spraying during the government shutdown because we didn't see clouds. And I'm looking at, the contrail finder. I'm looking at radiosonde data. I'm like, yeah, it's like really dry. Now that could be a coincidence. Could totally be a coincidence. Maybe I'm the one who's brain dead here. But the problem is this. Planes create on the order of 20 quadrillion ultrafine particles per second at 80% thrust. They're doing that if it's making a cloud or not. It's not like the nanoparticles of metal go away. So what are we talking about here with the nanoparticles of metal? I don't think people have really wrapped their head around this. Where's my bookmark? Here it is. So I'm gonna make it as clear as I possibly can because I like to go with stuff I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. This would stick in a court of law. And what we have right here is metals detected in jet exhaust. Now, most people would say, well, they're spraying us with heavy metals. None of these metals on this line here are heavy metals. You really need to look up the definition of heavy. It's by atomic weight. So anyway, we won't get into that. So where does this come from and why does it matter? Because this is from a paper called Chemical Characterization of Freshly Emitted Particulate Matter from Aircraft Exhaust Using Single Particle Mass Spectrometry. What did they find? They found chromium, iron, molybdenum, sodium, calcium, aluminum, vanadium, barium, Oh, there's aluminum and barium, cobalt, copper, nickel, lead, magnesium, manganese, silicon, titanium, zirconium were also detected in the jet exhaust. So all of these metals are in the jet exhaust. If you actually look at the paper, and I actually have, all this is going to be available on chemtrailfacts.com, and I haven't shown this to anybody yet, so I'll show it to you. This is from that same paper, and this is a PowerPoint presentation showing their results, chemical characterization of freshly emitted particles. And when you scroll down here, and I'm just going to go straight for the important part, metals detected in exhaust particles, greater than 10%, sodium, iron, calcium, chromium. Again, I said calcium was one of the metals they want to geoengineer with. Coincidence? I don't think so. I mean, it is a coincidence, and it isn't. 1 to 10% silicon, aluminum, cobalt, copper, molybdenum, and magnesium. Less than 1% vanadium, manganese, nickel, barium, titanium, and lead, and zirconium. These are the metals that are coming out of the back of the planes, whether you see a white stripe or not. How much metals are in the air at any given time? I'll type Gaia in, and I'll show you. You can go right here. High resolution global aviation emissions inventory based on ADS-B 2019 through 2021. And in 2019, they say right here that non-volatile particulate matter mass is 21.4 gigagrams. So 21.4 gigagrams. If I take that, that's I'm going to write gigagrams, and we're going to change that to pounds, and then we'll do it. So that's 47 million pounds. Okay, that's 47 million pounds of soot and metals in 2019 that came out. I can do it in kilograms if you like. So I mean, either way, gigagrams to kilograms, you do the math. It's 2.14 times to the 7th power. Regardless, that's 7 zeros behind it. It's a big ass number. My point is, that's 47 million pounds of soot and metals coming out of planes just in 2019, the year before COVID, before it all dipped and went back up. That's coming out whether you see a white stripe or not. Is that a chemtrail? Yes, it's a trail of chemicals. But for freak's sake, water is a chemical. So are we really gonna split hairs about terminology all day long? Because technically, if we want to, get real technical about, what is the meaning of words, if I get my water hose and I spray it into the air, that is a chemtrail of H2O. That's dihydrogen monoxide chemtrails. But at the end of the day, I focus on, how much damage is that, and how does that compare to global emissions of aluminum in the atmosphere? And then you see something like CMAS, which is calcium, magnesium, aluminosilicate. People do these tests of rainwater all the time, and they show how much aluminum's in their rainwater. Here's another challenge. Ask any one of the people who's ever done a rainfall sample who tested for aluminum, did you test for silicon? Because if you don't, then you cannot differentiate between, did it come from a plane? Did it come from a local pollution source? Or is it mineral dust, like Saharan desert dust, like dirt that has been lifted up by what's called the Brewer-Dobson circulation into the air? This is called aluminosilicate. It is typically 1 aluminum to 3 silicon. So if you get 3,000 parts per million silicon and 1,000 part per million aluminum, that's not chemtrails, that's dirt.
Jim, what about those anomalies? We often see these videos and photos of very strange moments with aircraft.
Well, if you see it coming out of the butt end of the plane, that's called the auxiliary power unit. It's called an APU. Go look it up. It's a thing. The APU is the auxiliary power unit. And there's been a couple famous videos that have gone around. One where a plane was on a tarmac, it's on the ground at an airport. And there's these plumes of smoke just shooting out the tail end of the plane. That was actually an APU that caught on fire. And all you have to do is, instead of typing in chemtrail plane on, airport, tarmac, type in, commercial aviation APU fire, and you'll see the exact same video from the original source telling you exactly what the hell it is. You can go ask AI, if you trust it, what is an auxiliary power unit and can it smoke be generated from it? That's what you're seeing in those videos. Other videos where they show, these hoses, looks like a nozzle on the side of the plane, and all this, liquid just coming out, and they're spraying chemtrails, and that's another case where you have fuel air dumping. It's not common. Usually it's because there's something wrong with the plane. They need to land. They have to weigh out exactly how much fuel can be on the plane when it takes off, and when it comes in for a landing. If it's not at a certain weight, they have to dump that fuel. That fuel is toxic. If you're too low to the ground, there have been lawsuits where kids in like kindergartens are getting dumped, fuel dumped on them that did not evaporate before hitting the ground. Fallen, Nevada had a very famous case against the United States military because when they switched to JP8 jet fuel, they had a certain altitude that they were allowed to dump fuel at, but they changed from JP4 to JP8 jet fuel, and this JP8 was not evaporating before hitting the ground. This caused a leukemia outbreak in Fallen, Nevada, and there was a class action lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force, which led to changing the altitude, the minimum altitude at which they could dump fuel. There are thousands of cases where, governments, private companies do stuff, end up poisoning people. And that's why I talk about pollution, privacy, and propaganda. Pollution is real. Weather modification is pollution. Geoengineering is pollution. What planes are doing in the sky is pollution. Whether we're talking about the metals, the soot, or even the clouds they're making, that is visible pollution, which is blocking sunlight, changing the diffraction and diffusion of light, which changes the fraction which is available for vitamin D absorption, for photosynthesis of plant life, for psychological profiles of people on the ground who have serious nephophobia or just have seasonal affective disorder because they never get to see the sun. They live in a high traffic area. These are all real concerns. And I'm not discounting any of them. In fact, I'm the one who's literally just trying to get people to understand, if you care about making these lines go away, you need to understand how they're made. And then you need to understand that even when the planes aren't making the lines, it's still a freaking problem. And if you understand that, then you can actually go and you can talk to your legislator, you can talk to a lawyer and sue, but you need to understand how to explain this stuff. That's why words matter. That's why this nuanced conversation matters. You're never going to get rid of the lines in the sky if you keep going, it's secret pumps and pipes, and Bill Gates is behind it, or the CIA. What are you going to do about that? I mean, honestly, what could you do about the CIA running a secret government program? Well, I'll give you an example. When they did the zinc cadmium sulfide sprayings during the 1950s through the 1970s, it wasn't until 2008 that the government admitted they did it. This was the U.S. Army Chemical Corps of Engineers. The U.S. Army Chemical Corps was spraying radioactive zinc cadmium sulfide for damn near 20 years, from 1950s through the 1970s, and did not admit to it till 38 years later. So if you want to stay with this narrative, if you want to believe what you believe, then you're, Hell, I used to make the joke all the time. I'm currently 49 years old. I'll be 80 years old and watching a holographic, display, and I'm watching CNN News, and they're going to come on and they're going to say, back in the early 2010s, the CIA was involved in a secret program to geoengineer the entire planet, where they were using a special cocktail of chemicals which made clouds to block sunlight in the belief that they would somehow cool the planet. And then you can go, I knew it. But will it matter? Because your old ass is about to die, and you couldn't do anything about the secret government program then. You couldn't do anything about it when you were in hospice, about to die in the hospital. Everything I'm doing is based on the single premise that what can I do about what I can prove? Because I want to make a difference, and I want to give people hope. Hope is the opposite of fear. I want people to be hopeful that they can do something about this and empower them with information so they can be an activist and do something about it. I'm not here. I'm going to curse because this is what I do here. I'm not your info fucking tainer. I'm not here for your info fucking tainment. If you want that, there's 150, fear porn pushing people that are going to give you exactly what you need. I'm here to challenge you to think. This is called metacognition. Look it up. This is me pushing you off of Mount Stupid in your Dunning-Kruger world view so that you realize, just like I realized over a decade ago, I was wrong. I was so wrong that I had to change everything I thought about this thing, and I'm still learning more about it every single day. Jerm here is being intellectually honest with you guys by giving you the opportunity to hear an alternative perspective. What was ironic about the comment section on the last video was some jackass on there had the nerve to say, could we get somebody else on with an alternative perspective? He already was on here, you dumb motherfucker. Dane Wigington was on here. So the alternative perspective is literally on Geoengineering Watch. Go watch the dimming. That is the alternative perspective. That's not the alt. That is the mainstream perspective of chemtrails. What I'm telling you is the alternative explanation. The only other explanation is you got debunkers here, you got chemtards here, and me smack in the middle going, the debunkers are wrong because it's not harmless water vapors. The chemtards are wrong because it's not all pumps and pipes and secret government program. It's both. It's water vapor turning into clouds, which is weather modification. It is climate engineering. Some of it may be intentional. Most of it isn't. But regardless, it is climate engineering, and it's a problem. And it's a problem whether they're making white lines or not. That's the most nuanced version of the story you're going to get. Both sides are diametrically opposed. One says it's completely harmless. One says it's going to kill you. And I'm going, I don't freaking know if it's going to kill you, but it's definitely a problem. Is that as clear as I can make myself on that?
You haven't said anything about rocketry.
That's where I started with this, was like I was trying to compare the numbers. So I said 44 million pounds of nanoparticles coming from jet exhaust. And that's 43 million flights that year in 2019. Okay? To put this into perspective, this is about 2.8 billion gallons of jet fuel. Now let's compare that to one space shuttle launch. The solid rocket boosters on the space shuttle, when it was taking off at NASA, produced 302 million tons of aluminum oxide. One launch produces more aluminum than every single plane flying every single day for all of 2019. I did the math on it at one point, and it came to close to, I think it was all of the space shuttle flights combined came to like 808,000 tons of aluminum oxide. I could go back and revisit that real quick. I have it calculated somewhere.
The chemtrailers never talk about NASA and SpaceX, by the way. They never mention rockets.
I mean, 50% of them probably believe the Earth's flat, so they don't even believe that these are real rockets. This is all just CGI. But yeah, you're right. Like you can go look, and the history and the timestamps don't lie. I did an entire series called Chemtrails from Space on sounding rockets, which intentionally release barium, trimethyl aluminum, lithium, strontium in the upper atmosphere. These sounding rockets are used in combination with facilities like HARP, ionospheric heaters, with other upper atmospheric radars like SuperDARN, the Super Dual Auroral Radar Network. All these are mapped out on climateviewer.org. Sounding rockets intentionally dump chemicals. Then you've got solid rocket boosters, which are predominantly aluminum. I think it's perchlorate. So makes massive amounts of aluminum oxide in the upper atmosphere. Now, I tried to relate that to the SpaceX thing, but SpaceX, a lot of their rockets are running on liquid oxygen. So it's kind of changing now. It totally depends. Now, the Artemis rocket, solid rocket, it's kind of like the Atlas V. You know what I mean? Like the Artemis rocket that they just built, I believe, is also, I know it has solid rocket boosters on it, just the same. They're identical to the ones that the space shuttle launched. So those are putting a massive amount of aluminum into the air. But then I started to go, well, am I being hyperbolic about this? Like, am I over fixated on, the human born sources of aluminum? Because aluminum is like the most plentiful freaking metal in all dirt worldwide. And you compare the numbers to like how much, sea mass ends up in the upper troposphere. And it just absolutely dwarfs all the other numbers. But that's trusting the science, which I'm not going to just take their word for it, which is why I suggest to people, if you're going to do a rainfall sample, make sure you test for silicon also. So test for silicon and aluminum, and then you'll know, well, if you see a lot of silicon, 3 to 4 times as much silicon as you see aluminum, then that's probably dirt. That is mineral dust. And that's why you're basically giving the debunkers all the ammunition they need to mock you mercilessly when you can't think critically about the thing you're doing. If you're going to go pay all this money to go get your rain sample tested at a laboratory, you could throw silicon in there and just know for yourself. All right, just so that I can double check to make sure I'm not an idiot. Let me make sure it's not mineral dust that's in there, because that's really easy to tell. Is it aluminosilicate? I didn't know this 5 years ago. I mean, honestly, I had no freaking clue. But then after, you get into these arguments, well, look at the rainfall samples. And they go, well, have you ever considered this? And then you start looking at the totals, and then you talk to a couple geologists, talk to a couple, atmospheric physicists, and they're like, you do understand that, before humans, there was rain. So, before humans, there were clouds and there were rain. What made those clouds and what made the rain? Well, there were cloud condensation nuclei. What cloud condensation nuclei were the predominant sources of cloud formation and rainfall before humans existed? Bacteria and mineral dust. Bacteria, what do you mean bacteria? Like Pseudomonas syringae. It is a cloud-seeding bacteria. It forms ice. Rainforests. Trees put off their own cloud condensation nuclei. So trees actually release chemicals, which are aerosols that make clouds. That's why we have things called rainforests. So the point is, the atmosphere is very complicated. The more you think you know about it, the more the more you learn about it, the more you'll realize we barely understand what the hell's going on in the air. And that's why you can't get an accurate weather forecast 7 days from now. That and the fact that people are constantly trying to modify the weather. I mean, how could they ever get it right? But as far as cloud formation goes, aerosol cloud interaction is the greatest unknown in climate science. And it will remain that way for a very long time because it is modeling chaos. It is modeling very minute, we're talking about nanoparticles and how they interact with sunlight, with water vapor, with wind, with temperature and pressure, and then trying to model that on a global scale. I don't think people realize how big the damn planet is till you really start to, look at maps regularly, and then you start to go, well, no wonder we don't really understand what the hell's going on. In fact, I'll leave you with this one. The contrail problem, the chemtrail, we'll use whatever word you want. Chemtrail problem. Geosynchronous satellites cannot detect 80% of contrails that low Earth orbit satellites can detect. And low Earth orbit satellites miss 80% of contrails that ground-based all-sky cameras observe. Which means this, that if a camera on the ground can see contrails that a low Earth orbit, like we're talking about like Starlink, that area, if ground-based observation sees 80% more contrails than low Earth orbit satellites, and they see 80% more than geosynchronous satellites, then obviously people on the ground with iPhones see more contrails than scientists believe exist. So it's our duty to record and report this problem because science, which, is never settled and is usually wrong, does not have this figured out. We cannot determine how much of the sky, how much of the clouds in the sky are attributable to planes flying through it, because you only have about a 10 to 45 minute window between a linear contrail becoming a big fat ass cirrus cloud. And once that line fans out and blocks the sun and turns into a cirrus cloud, the scientists, the people who are observing all this, there's no way to tell the difference between natural cirrus clouds and man-made cirrus clouds. And that's why I came up with the hashtag cirrus clouds matter, is because that is at the heart of the problem. You have a very short window of time between planes making the original, what they call cirrus homogenetus, man-made cirrus, and then cirrus homomutatus, mutated. It is now fanned out, has become like natural cirrus. During that window of opportunity, you have to observe it to know that it was what made the cirrus cloud. So we're grossly underreporting how much aviation, commercial, cargo, military contributes to cloud cover. And that is because there's no will to really understand it. Why is there no will to understand it? Because all the people who are pissed off about it are busy saying that it's pumps and pipes and secret government programs, and not saying, hey, I'm tired. Stop trying to be an expert. Stop trying to be, so freaking in the know that you're just, better than everybody else. You simply have to say to your legal representative, your government or whatever, I don't like planes making clouds that block the sun. Once you get to that point in your life, you're no longer stuck in this speculation loop. You're no longer stuck with this narrative that somebody else implanted in your head that you now believe like it's, written in the Bible. It is not. It is just taking all of the narrative and throwing it away. The simplest slave speak free version of the story is this: I don't like planes making clouds that block the sun. Please stop. And once you get to that point in your life, then nobody can debunk you. Nobody can argue with that. Planes do make clouds. Those clouds block the sun. Now I'm not speculating at all. I'm not putting any of my, personal beliefs, especially crazy personal beliefs that I cannot prove, into it. This is like debate 101. So once you get to that point, and I've done this to multiple debunkers, and I tell them, I say, look, I just don't like planes farting, and I don't like plane farts making clouds that block out the sun. And then they go, well, why? And I'm like, because it's ugly, okay? I don't like linear things. There's nothing linear in nature. There are no straight lines in nature, except planes, apparently. You say that's natural. Explain to me how that's natural. And then when I turn it on them, then they all of a sudden they're on the defensive. This is just logic, guys. So I'm not here to tell you, everything you believe is bullshit and, you shouldn't care about this. I'm saying everything you believe is bullshit and you should care about this enough to actually educate yourself. That's all. And I think that's what you're looking for too. Yeah. Is that you're wanting to really understand, well, what's the other side of the story? And I don't expect Jerm to believe everything that I'm saying either. It's going to be on him to take, what resonates with him and then come to his own conclusion. And that's what everybody should be doing. So at the end of the day, I always say the same thing. The day we all agree is the day we could all be wrong. And I'm never gonna agree with, I'm not the go along to get along kind of guy. I like the confrontation. I enjoy it. So open invitation to all you keyboard warriors in the comment section. Put your big boy panties on and come on. You can hit me up at jim@climateviewer.com. I'll gladly debate you. I'll come on. You can make a PowerPoint presentation. You can bring a whole club of PhDs with you, and I will gently spank your ass right there live on the internet, because I know what the hell I'm talking about. I've done my research, and if you do prove me wrong, I will congratulate you, and I will go correct the record and admit I'm wrong in front of the entire internet. Because you know what? That's what activists do, not infotainers. Infotainers block your ass. They do not allow you to speak. So my hat's off to you for having the conversation, because most people don't even want to have, and especially when they know that it's not popular. Because I know that you read the comments. I know you got the hate mail, and yet here we are doing this again. So either you're a glutton for punishment or you're honestly curious. I got a great life. I don't need this shit. I could walk away from this at any moment and go, play in the woods with my kids, go camping, and, we'd all be happier for it. But at the end of the day, until I have a cacophony of people resonating the same material and teaching people that this is a problem that needs to be dealt with, it's only going to get worse. The number of flights per year goes up every single year and will only continue to. The number of clouds they make will only go up every single year and will continue to. I don't want my grandchildren growing up in a world where geoengineers legalized the thing and did the thing because a bunch of people were so busy bitching about chemtrails that they not only did nothing about aviation pollution, making cirrus clouds and blocking out sunlight on a daily basis and ruining the view for everybody, but in addition to that, they provided a cover for the airline industry and the actual geoengineers who are trying to legalize it and deploy it right now, like Stardust Labs. That is unacceptable.
Well, on that note, Jim Lee, one last time, how can I follow your work?
Everything I have is at connect.climateviewer.com. You can join my Substack. You can join my Telegram chat. My socials are on there. I'm usually at Climate Viewer on all the things. So that's YouTube, Rumble, X is where I'm most. If you want to argue with me, come over to x.com/climateviewer and just give me a follow and then start complaining. And, I pick up the phone regularly on my lunch break and just have at people, kind of like Trump on my toilet. And other than that, I have three to five websites, but all of them are linked there. ClimateViewer.com, ClimateViewer.org, WeatherModificationHistory.com, and most recently, Chemtrail Facts. Forget all that and just go to connect.climateviewer.com, and that's my link tree to all my things. And if you appreciate the work I'm doing, you can leave a donation. If you don't, I don't really care. I won't, all the money goes to, trying to, build a better podcast, build a better mousetrap, and keep working on my website like Chemtrail Facts, which I'm building right now.
Jim Lee, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
It's always a pleasure, Big Jerm.